Have you ever found yourself holding your smartphone right in your hand, maybe even using the flashlight on it?
While actively tearing apart your living room looking for that exact same phone.
Yes, exactly. You're searching the couch cushions for the thing you are literally holding. Or
Mm.
how about this scenario? You walk purposefully into the kitchen, you grab the handle of the refrigerator, swing the door wide open, you're bathed in that cold fluorescent light, and then
Absolute static.
total blank. You just stand there staring at a jar of pickles, wondering what on earth you came into this room to retrieve.
It is a universally humbling experience. You stand there scanning the shelves, hoping the leftover takeout will somehow trigger your working memory, but the thought is just gone.
Completely gone.
And what's fascinating here is that from a neurobiological perspective, this isn't just some quirky lapse in concentration. It's a very specific failure of the brain's executive function to hold on to a short-term goal when faced with environmental distractions.
All right, and it's incredibly frustrating, especially when you pair it with the other major complaint that seems to hit everyone right around the same time. Let's talk about the wardrobe situation.
Ah, yes, the expanding waistline.
You're eating the exact same amount of food you did in your 20s.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, you might actually be eating less. You skip breakfast sometimes. You try to order the salad at lunch. Yet somehow, mysteriously, the waistbands of your pants are getting tighter and tighter.
The zipper becomes a daily negotiation.
A negotiation you start losing. And what is the universal societal reaction when these two things, the expanding waistline and the buffering brain, happen simultaneously? We look in the mirror, we sigh, and we say, well, I guess I'm just getting old.
We just write it off as the inevitable march of senescence.
But that's exactly what we are challenging today. Okay, let's unpack this, because the material we are looking at today is incredibly eye-opening. We're pulling from a densely packed, fascinating body of clinical insight, originally designed for people specifically in their 30s and 40s who are hitting this exact wall.
And hitting it hard.
Right. And the mission of this deep dive is clear. We are going to decode the biological mysteries behind these two incredibly frustrating signs of, quote-unquote, getting older. We are talking about the visceral fat that refuses to budge and the short-term memory that keeps slipping.
Because it's incredibly common to view these two phenomena, the stubborn belly fat and the sudden cognitive fog, as separate, unrelated, and entirely unavoidable symptoms of cellular aging. But the research and clinical data we are analyzing today make a truly paradigm-shifting claim.
Which is that they aren't separate.
Exactly. They are deeply connected. In fact, they are symptoms of the exact same underlying metabolic crisis happening simultaneously inside your body.
It forces us to look at these everyday annoyances, not as the inevitable rust of a biological machine wearing down, but as bright red warning lights on your body's dashboard.
Your system is trying to communicate something highly specific and highly urgent to you.
I think we really need to deconstruct that refrigerator moment a bit more, because everyone listening can relate to that feeling of mild panic. You're in your 30s or 40s. You are supposed to be in the absolute prime of your life.
You've gathered all this life experience.
Right, you're advancing in your career, you're managing a complex household, and yet your brain suddenly feels like it lacks the bandwidth to process a simple task. And alongside that, your body composition is shifting in ways that feel entirely divorced from your actual caloric intake.
You feel betrayed by your own biology.
Yes, so you accept the societal script. You accept that your metabolism is just slowing down because you crossed the threshold of 35.
And that acceptance is precisely where the danger lies. The research we're analyzing explicitly states that this specific type of physical and cognitive decline in your 30s and 40s is not natural aging.
It's not natural aging.
Let me repeat that because it is the foundational premise of our entire discussion. It is not natural aging. We need to frame this instead as a metabolic crisis warning.
A metabolic crisis warning. That sounds a lot more acute than just getting older. But what does that actually mean at a cellular level? Because we've all been sold this idea that your basal metabolic rate just plummets as you age, and there's nothing you can do about it.
The idea that your metabolism just falls off a cliff the moment you turn 30 is a pervasive myth. When you look at the longitudinal data on human metabolism, basal metabolic rates actually remain remarkably stable between the ages of 20 and 60.
Really? So it doesn't just slow down?
Not significantly, no. The decline we associate with our 30s and 40s isn't a loss of metabolic speed, it is a loss of metabolic flexibility. Think about why it's so dangerous to simply write off these symptoms, the tight pants, the lost keys, as just aging.
Because if you accept it as an inevitable function of time, you do nothing.
You surrender to it. You buy larger pants, you start using more sticky notes, and you treat the superficial symptoms because you believe the root cause, which is time, is unstoppable.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means your body is flashing a giant, blinding red warning light. It's signaling that both your brain function and your metabolic function are breaking down simultaneously. They are failing together.
Not because of the calendar.
Right, not because of the calendar, but because of a mechanical failure in how your body processes energy. A broken switch can be fixed. A crisis can be averted. You're not a victim of time. You're dealing with a software glitch in your body's operating system.
Which brings us to the actual culprits.
Yes, because if it isn't Father Time sneaking up on us, what is it? What's causing this twin breakdown of the gut and the mind?
To find the root of the dysfunction, we have to look at the modern environmental inputs we are feeding our biology. The data points directly to very specific, ubiquitous dietary habits. We're talking about the chronic daily consumption of highly refined carbohydrates and sugars,
The sweet donuts in the break room.
the spicy rice cakes like tteokbokki,
The quick bowls of ramen.
and those convenient little instant coffee mixes that are practically a food group in modern office culture.
The exact things we reach for when we're stressed, underslept, or just need a quick spike of dopamine and energy to survive a Tuesday afternoon slump.
We live in an environment where these hyper-palatable, highly processed foods are engineered to be irresistible.
But we usually just think of them as empty calories. A little harmless indulgence.
Calling them empty calories drastically understates what they do biochemically. The literature describes a very specific, aggressive physiological chain reaction that occurs when you consume these specific carbohydrate profiles. These aren't just calories, they are metabolic disruptors.
Because they hit the system so fast.
Exactly. When they enter your digestive tract, they lack the fiber matrix of whole foods, meaning they don't provide steady, sustainable energy. Instead, they are rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream, causing massive, violent blood sugar spikes.
Which forces the pancreas to scramble its emergency response team.
The beta cells in your pancreas detect this massive influx of glucose and rapidly secrete the hormone insulin. Now, insulin is an essential hormone. Its primary job is to shuttle glucose out of the blood and into your cells to be used for actual cellular energy, ATP production.
But there's a limit to how much glucose your cells can accept at any given moment.
Right. If you are sitting at a desk typing on a computer, your muscle cells are not demanding a massive surge of energy. They are full.
So the muscle cells essentially pull down the metal security gates and say, we're closed, we don't need any more energy.
And the glucose is still circulating in the blood, which is highly toxic if left unchecked.
So what does insulin do with all this excess?
When the muscle and liver glycogen stores are full, insulin is forced to switch from being an energy distributor to being a fat storage hormone. It has to pack that toxic excess glucose away. And where does it deposit it first?
The belly.
It drives it directly into the visceral cavity, packing it around your internal organs. It manifests right around your midsection as visceral adiposity, belly fat.
This is a crucial distinction that the research makes, and it really shifts how we need to view body composition. We traditionally think of belly fat as just stored energy, like a biological savings account that we can tap into later if we go for a jog.
But the material redefines this entirely.
It states that the stubborn belly fat of people in their 30s and 40s cannot be starved away simply by skipping a meal. You can't just casually undereat for a day and expect it to mobilize. Why? Because it defines this specific type of visceral fat as a massive sugar dump.
The sugar dump concept is vital for understanding insulin resistance. When you bombard your system with these extreme glucose spikes day after day, year after year, your cells naturally try to protect themselves from the onslaught.
They close the gates even tighter.
The insulin receptors on the surface of your cells begin to downregulate. They become deaf to insulin's signal. This is insulin resistance. Because the cells aren't responding, the pancreas pumps out even more insulin to try and force the blood sugar down. So now you have high blood sugar and chronically high insulin.
And high insulin is the biochemical signal that actively blocks fat burning.
Precisely. As long as insulin is elevated, the enzyme hormone-sensitive lipase, which is required to break down stored body fat, is completely suppressed. You are locked out of your own fat stores.
So the body has to frantically build new specialized storage facilities just to quarantine the overflow of toxic, unused glucose.
That visceral fat around your organs isn't a passive, healthy reserve of energy. It is an active, highly inflammatory quarantine zone for excess sugar. It actually secretes inflammatory cytokines, adipokines, that further worsen your insulin resistance systemically.
A highly inflammatory quarantine zone that completely reframes the frustration of the waistline. You aren't lacking willpower because the fat won't budge. Your biology is locked in a biochemical state of emergency.
It's aggressively hoarding this energy because the signaling pathways are completely jammed.
The metabolic switch is broken in the store fat position, and a simple caloric deficit isn't enough to override a hormonal blockade.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we approach the problem. You cannot fix a hormonal signaling issue with simple calorie restriction. If your body is actively hoarding this energy to protect your bloodstream from the toxic effects of high glucose, giving it slightly fewer carbohydrates isn't going to convince it to open the vault.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've established what this chronic excess sugar does to your midsection. It builds a highly inflammatory garbage dump to quarantine the overflow.
Yes.
But the research asks a chilling question. If excess circulating glucose is creating this toxic environment in your gut, what exactly is it doing when it travels up the carotid artery and into your brain?
The biochemical reality of what happens in the brain is stark. We have this leftover unused glucose circulating freely through the bloodstream. And glucose, in high concentrations, does not just float harmless.
It's reactive.
Highly reactive. Through a process called glycation, these sugar molecules literally bind to proteins and lipids in your bloodstream without the need for an enzyme. They create what the medical literature refers to as advanced glycation end products, appropriately acronymized as AGEs.
Advanced glycation end products. So this is the literal sticky residue the material talks about. Just these misformed glycated proteins floating through your vascular system, making their way up to your head.
That is an accurate way to visualize it. These AGEs are highly inflammatory cross-linked proteins. When they accumulate in the microvasculature of the brain, they trigger a massive cascade of oxidative stress. They physically attack the integrity of the brain cells.
So it's actual physical damage.
This sticky inflammatory residue disrupts the synaptic plasticity, the ability of your neurons to communicate, form new connections, and access stored information.
So it is literally gumming up the synaptic clefts. It's degrading the communication wires between your neurons.
Yes. And this provides us with the true anatomy of brain fog. When you are standing in front of the refrigerator, or when you are blanking on a familiar word in the middle of a meeting, it's not because your brain is just psychologically fatigued from a long day at work.
The data is adamant about this.
That specific type of sudden forgetfulness is a direct result of an acute inflammatory response caused by a systemic overload of carbohydrates. The neuroinflammation is actively impairing your hippocampus, the brain's memory center, from firing signals across those neural pathways.
I think a lot of people assume the brain needs sugar to function. We've been told our whole lives that the brain runs exclusively on glucose.
A very common misconception.
But what you were saying is that this chronic oversupply, the donut you ate to give yourself a boost at 2 p.m., is triggering an inflammatory cascade that is the exact reason you can't remember where you put your keys at 6 p.m. It's not stress. It's not a lack of sleep. It's literal physical inflammation impairing cognitive function.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the long-term medical implications are staggering. The research highlights a critical emerging paradigm in neurology. Modern medicine is increasingly referring to Alzheimer's disease and other forms of cognitive decline as type 3 diabetes.
Type 3 diabetes, essentially diabetes of the brain. That really drives home how serious this metabolic connection is.
It is a profound shift in how we view neurodegeneration. We know type 2 diabetes involves systemic insulin resistance in the muscles and liver. Type 3 diabetes posits that the brain itself becomes insulin resistant.
The brain stops responding to the signal.
The brain's glucose transporters, specifically GLUT4, become downregulated. So despite there being massive amounts of glucose in the blood, the brain cells actually begin to starve because the insulin signaling required to let the glucose into the neurons is broken. This starvation, combined with the inflammatory accumulation of those sticky AGEs and amyloid plaques, leads directly to neural death. The warning here is stark. Ignoring this carb-induced forgetfulness in your 30s and 40s is not just accepting an inconvenience. You're watching the early stages of neural decay, currently manifesting as simple brain fog, but laying the groundwork for irreversible cognitive disease.
I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, directly. How does it feel to know that your forgetfulness and your stubborn belly fat share the exact same root cause? To realize that the expanding waistline and the buffering brain are not two separate tragedies of getting older, but a single unified cry for help from a biology that is drowning in a toxic glucose environment.
It's intense.
It is intense, but honestly, it's also incredibly empowering. Because if they share the exact same physiological root cause, it means they share the same cure. You don't need a pill for your memory and a treadmill for your waist. You just need to fix the metabolic switch.
That is the pivotal takeaway. We have thoroughly identified the mechanism of the breakdown, insulin resistance and glucose toxicity. Now we must pivot to the mechanism of repair. And the framework provided uses a brilliant biological analogy to explain how to resolve this crisis. It states that you cannot just tinker with the margins, you have to completely overhaul the body's primary fuel system.
The engine analogy. This is crucial for understanding the transition.
Yeah.
Right now, if you are eating a standard modern carb-heavy diet, your body is running on a gasoline engine. And not just any gasoline. It's like a dirty, outdated engine running on unrefined fuel that is constantly pumping out toxic smoke, smog, and exhaust.
That exhaust is the systemic inflammation.
Exactly. The advanced glycation end products, the brain fog. You cannot just try to drive the car slightly slower to fix the pollution problem. You need to turn that dirty combustion engine completely off. And you need to switch over to a clean, highly efficient electric engine. And in human biology, that alternative engine runs on fat.
This brings us to the core intervention proposed by the clinical data, LCHF, which stands for low carb, high fat. To initiate this metabolic fuel switch, the literature emphasizes prioritizing specific nutrient-dense foods. We are talking about incorporating fresh, high-quality meats, natural butter, extra virgin olive oil, and avocados.
So we are completely removing the refined processed carbohydrates, the ramen and the tteokbokki, and replacing them with healthy, dense, monounsaturated and saturated fats.
Yeah.
But I know what people are thinking. Wait, if I cut out carbs, won't my brain fog get worse? Doesn't the brain require glucose to survive?
That is the most common misconception, and it touches on the biological adaptation phase. Yes, the brain does require a small baseline amount of glucose for certain specific functions. However, your body does not require you to eat that glucose.
Right, the body can make its own.
When you restrict dietary carbohydrates, your liver engages a process called gluconeogenesis, where it creates the exact amount of glucose the brain needs from non-carbohydrate sources like amino acids and glycerol.
So the brain won't starve.
Exactly. But the real magic happens with the rest of the brain's energy demands. When you severely restrict carbohydrate intake and replace those calories with high-quality fats, you force your body out of its glucose dependency and into a beneficial state of metabolic emergency. You shut off the supply of easy, dirty fuel.
The body realizes, okay, the external glucose is gone, insulin levels are dropping, we need a new primary fuel source to survive.
And because insulin is finally low, the biochemical locks on your fat cells open. The body is forced to start metabolizing that stubborn visceral fat, the inflammatory sugar dump we talked about earlier.
And when the body starts burning that fat, something incredible happens in the liver. This is where we get into the biochemistry of ketones.
Correct. As the liver breaks down these fatty acids, either from the dietary fat you are consuming like olive oil or the adipose tissue it is finally pulling from your midsection, it engages in ketogenesis. It converts these fats into highly efficient, water-soluble energy molecules called ketone bodies, primarily beta-hydroxybutyrate or BHB.
The source material often compares these ketones to a radically different class of fuel to drive the point home. Let's look at that comparison. Glucose, the fuel derived from carbohydrates, is compared to burning cheap coal or briquettes. It provides energy, sure, but it burns incompletely.
It leaves behind a massive amount of metabolic soot.
Sticky residue and oxidative stress. In your cells, that smoke manifests as free radicals that damage your mitochondria.
Ketones, on the other hand, act as premium aviation fuel. When your mitochondria burn beta-hydroxybutyrate, the ATP production, the actual cellular energy yield, is significantly higher per molecule of oxygen consumed compared to glucose.
It's just a better fuel source.
It is a phenomenally clean, incredibly efficient burn. It produces drastically fewer reactive oxygen species and significantly reduces systemic inflammation. It is quite literally the highest grade, most efficient fuel your biological machinery can utilize.
But this premium aviation fuel doesn't just stay in your muscles or your liver. It travels through the vascular system right up to the brain. And here's where the exact mechanics of clearing the brain fog come into play. We need to talk about how ketones interact with the blood-brain barrier.
The blood-brain barrier, or BBB, is a highly selective, semi-permeable border of endothelial cells that protects the brain from circulating toxins or pathogens in the bloodstream. It is very strict about what it lets through. Large, complicated molecules are rejected.
But ketones get a free pass.
Ketones are transported across the blood-brain barrier rapidly and efficiently via specialized monocarboxylate transporters. They are granted VIP access directly into the brain's microenvironment.
And once those ketones cross the barrier and enter the neurons, the data suggests it is literally like flipping a light switch in a dark room. You have these neural networks that have been effectively starving, struggling with insulin resistance, suffocating under the inflammation and the oxidative stress from years of burning dirty coal. Suddenly, they are flooded with massive amounts of clean, highly efficient premium aviation fuel that doesn't require insulin to enter the cell.
The immediate cognitive effects reported in the clinical literature are profound. Individuals who successfully adapt to an LCHF lifestyle consistently report a radical shift in executive function. They say things like the cognitive static just vanished, and my mental stamina and concentration skyrocketed.
It's not just a feeling, it's real biology.
This is not a psychological placebo effect. It is a predictable biological certainty. The neural tissue is finally being supplied with a clean, high-yielding energy source after decades of struggling with glucose toxicity. The neuroinflammation subsides, the synaptic pathways clear, and these individuals report experiencing a sharp, rapid-fire cognitive clarity that they genuinely assumed they had permanently lost to the aging process.
It's like wiping a thick layer of mud off a solar panel. Suddenly, the energy just flows uninterrupted. You are literally getting your mind back. But the protocol we are analyzing doesn't stop there. If switching to a low-carb, high-fat diet provides the clean fuel that stops the daily damage and clears the fog, the research introduces a secondary, highly synergistic protocol.
The booster phase.
A powerful booster designed to actually reverse the cellular damage that has already been done. We aren't just stopping the biological clock here. We are activating a mechanism to actively turn it backward.
The intervention we are referring to is intermittent fasting. Specifically, the framework strongly advocates for time-restricted eating, utilizing the 16-8 timer method. Functionally, this means you consume all your daily caloric requirements within an 8-hour window, and you maintain a strict fast, consuming absolutely 0 calories, only water, black coffee, or plain tea for the remaining 16 hours of the day.
Now, for someone who is used to the standard modern dietary pattern of eating from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed, grazing on snacks, drinking caloric beverages, 16 hours sounds like an impossibly long time to go without food.
It can sound daunting.
But the justification for this specific 16-hour window is rooted in some of the most rigorous, heavy-hitting science of the 21st century. We're talking about Nobel Prize-winning cellular biology here.
Yes, the biological mechanism we are introducing is called autophagy. The word itself translates literally from Greek as self-eating, derived from auto meaning self and phagein meaning to eat.
Self-eating. I know we've moved past simple analogies, but that still sounds incredibly intense. It sounds a bit like cellular cannibalism.
It sounds aggressive, but it's actually the most elegant, vital, regenerative process in human biology. And to emphasize just how foundational this mechanism is, the discovery of the precise molecular mechanisms of autophagy won Dr. Yoshinori Osumi the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2016.
The Nobel Prize.
It was globally recognized as a profound fundamental mechanism for cellular health, disease prevention, and life extension.
So how does this Nobel Prize-winning self-eating actually work? Why do we need to endure a 16-hour fasting window to trigger it?
It comes down to evolutionary biology and cellular signaling pathways. When you are constantly eating, when there is a steady influx of external nutrients, your body's metabolic pathways are dominated by a protein complex called mTOR.
And NPR does what?
mTOR is the signal for growth and cellular proliferation. As long as mTOR is active, your cells are entirely focused on building and storing. They never have a moment to clean house. But when you go roughly 14 to 16 hours without external food, especially when your insulin is already low from an LCHF diet, mTOR is suppressed, and a different energy-sensing pathway called AMPK is activated.
AMPK senses the fast.
It senses that external nutrients have dropped to 0. It realizes, okay, no food is coming in, but we still need raw materials to maintain critical daily functions and cellular repair. To survive, The cells are forced to look inward. They begin scavenging inside your own body.
They initiate the ultimate internal cellular cleanup protocol.
Precisely. Autophagy is the body's internal recycling system. Specialized cellular structures called autophagosomes act like microscopic garbage trucks. They patrol the intracellular environment, hunting down damaged organelles, old and dying cells, and misfolded proteins.
Including the sticky stuff in the brain.
Crucially, they actively hunt down and consume that exact same sticky residue we talked about earlier, the advanced glycation end products, and amyloid proteins that are clogging up the brain and the vascular tissues.
The cellular debris left over from decades of burning, dirty metabolic fuel.
Yes. The autophagosomes surround this cellular trash, transport it to the lysosomes where it is broken down by powerful enzymes into basic amino acids and fatty acids, and then the cell literally recycles those raw materials. It takes the garbage and uses it to build brand new, highly functioning, healthy cellular infrastructure and fresh energy. It is a profound process of self-renewal.
This raises an incredibly important point about how we view anti-aging in our modern hyperconsumerist society. The material draws a really sharp critical contrast here. We spend billions of dollars globally on external artificial anti-aging attempts. People buy exorbitant topical creams, they undergo invasive cosmetic surgeries, they spend massive amounts of money on anti-aging injections, stem cell therapies, and peptide treatments, all desperately trying to patch up the outside to look younger.
This raises an important question, doesn't it? Why apply a cosmetic superficial patch to the outside when your internal biological machinery is fully capable of profound systemic renewal?
It's already built in.
The research argues passionately that you do not need to spend exorbitant amounts of money on these artificial interventions. Intermittent fasting acts as a complete self-directed cellular remodeling program that is entirely free and biologically endogenous.
By merely withholding food for 16 hours.
You flip the switch from mTOR to AMPK. You activate a genetic program that literally turns back your biological age from the inside out. It cleans out the decay of your past dietary mistakes and builds new youthful infrastructure at a cellular level.
A free internal cellular remodel. That is an incredibly empowering way to look at it. It takes the entire concept of fasting from I am depriving myself of food and suffering to I am actively turning on my body's elite regenerative cleanup crew. It shifts the mindset from deprivation to activation. You are in the driver's seat.
And this brings us to the core philosophy of the material regarding this specific stage of life. It offers a powerful, much-needed reframing of what it actually means to be in your 30s and 40s.
Yes, the psychological motivation embedded in this data is fantastic. It relays such an empowering message to you, the listener. Mainstream culture constantly tells you that hitting 35 or 40 is the beginning of the end. You're over the hill. It's an inevitable time of physical decline, aches, pains, and slowing down.
Which is completely backward.
This biological framework completely flips that script. It says no, your 30s and 40s are not a period of decline. From an evolutionary perspective, they are the golden years of your life. This is the exact moment where you should be performing at your absolute peak. You finally have the accumulated life experience, the professional wisdom, and the emotional maturity that you completely lacked in your 20s.
If you can combine that hard-earned wisdom with peak physical vitality and cognitive sharpness, you are virtually unstoppable.
The tragic irony of modern life is that just as people gain this profound psychological and professional maturity, their biological vehicle breaks down entirely due to environmental and metabolic mismanagement. The research implores the listener, do not waste these golden years trapped in a foggy, unresponsive brain, weighed down by a highly inflammatory, sagging waistline.
You have the exact biological tools required to fix the vehicle.
So let's get down to the brass tacks of implementation. The material provides an exact, actionable, step-by-step blueprint for the listener to initiate this metabolic reversal today. It's not a complicated textbook of rules, it's a streamlined three-step process. Step 1. Starting today, look critically at your plate. Take your current intake of refined carbohydrates, the rice, the bread, the noodles, the sugars, and aggressively cut it in half.
Just start by removing the cheapest, dirtiest coal from the engine.
And step 2 is critical for compliance and hormonal balance. You must replace those missing carbohydrate calories so you aren't chronically undereating and slowing your thyroid. You replace those carbs with high-quality, calorically dense fuel. You increase your intake of fresh meats, natural butter, eggs, and healthy oils.
You fill the caloric void with the specific precursors to that clean aviation fuel, beta-hydroxybutyrate.
And finally, step 3, the regenerative booster. After you finish dinner, you close the kitchen, you stop consuming calories. You maintain a completely empty digestive tract for exactly 16 hours until your first meal the next day. If you finish dinner at 8 p.m., you do not consume any calories again until noon the next day.
You hydrate with water, maybe some black coffee or tea, but absolutely no fuel.
You let insulin drop, you let AMPK activate, and you let the autophagos and garbage trucks do their restorative work.
The clinical confidence in this protocol is remarkable. It doesn't ask for a grueling 6-month commitment before you see vague, subjective results. It offers a very specific 2-week promise. It guarantees that if you strictly maintain this LCHF macronutrient profile, combined with the 16-hour fasting window for just 14 days, you will force your body through the adaptation phase and experience a dramatic, undeniable physiological shift.
Now, I want to introduce a little bit of reality here because those first few days can be tough. If someone has been running on sugar for 40 years, turning that engine off isn't always perfectly smooth. People often talk about the keto flu during that first week.
That is a very important point regarding the adaptation phase. When you drop your carbohydrates and your insulin levels plummet, your kidneys receive a signal to excrete excess water that was previously being held by the glycogen in your tissues. As that water flushes out, it takes critical electrolytes with it, specifically sodium, potassium, and magnesium.
Which causes the flu feeling.
This acute electrolyte depletion is what causes the headaches, the lethargy, and the muscle cramps commonly referred to as the keto flu. It is easily mitigated by aggressively salting your food and supplementing with electrolytes during those first few days. Once you cross that metabolic bridge and upregulate the enzymes required to burn fat efficiently, the promised results manifest rapidly.
And the expected results detailed in the text, once you cross that bridge, are phenomenal. First, they describe a feeling of immense systemic lightness when waking up in the morning. The chronic bloating and systemic water retention from high insulin vanish. No more dragging yourself out of bed feeling exhausted and inflamed before the day even begins.
Second, there is the promise of endless, stable physical stamina throughout the day. Because your physiology is no longer riding the violent, exhausting roller coaster of postprandial blood sugar spikes, followed by reactive hypoglycemic crashes, and because your body now has uninterrupted access to the massive, stable energy reserves in your own adipose tissue, your energy levels remain remarkably steady and boundless from morning until night.
And the third result, the one that really tackles the refrigerator amnesia we started with. A brain so clear it feels like a literal light bulb has been turned on inside your head. The cognitive fog lifts entirely. The sticky glycated residue is actively being cleared out by the autophagy process. The neurons are firing efficiently on premium ketone aviation fuel, and you finally have your executive function back.
The core promise of this deep dive is clear and deeply encouraging. You are not a helpless passenger on the one-way ride of biological aging. You can take back complete control of your metabolic pathways. You have the endogenous biological mechanisms available right now to return to the cognitive sharpness and the physical leanness you experienced in your 20s.
It simply requires understanding the biochemistry.
Switching the primary fuel source and giving your cellular machinery the required time it needs to clean itself.
What an incredible journey this deep dive has been. We started with the universal frustrating phenomenon of forgetting why we walked into a room and the quiet despair of the ever-tightening waistband. We unpacked the pervasive myth of aging, revealing it to be a highly specific metabolic warning siren.
We discovered how chronic everyday carbohydrate consumption downregulates our insulin receptors,
Creating a toxic inflammatory sugar dump in our bellies and a sticky neurodegenerative residue in our brains. The terrifying biological reality of type 3 diabetes. But then, we found the physiological solution. We learned how to shut off the dirty combustion engine and fire up the clean, highly efficient power of an LCHF diet.
We learned how beta-hydroxybutyrate provides premium aviation fuel for our starving neurons.
And how the Nobel Prize-winning science of autophagy acts as an elite internal recycling plant, scrubbing our cellular infrastructure clean and actively reversing the biological clock simply by utilizing the power of a 16-hour fast.
It is a remarkable synthesis of evolutionary biology and practical lifestyle intervention. But before we conclude, I want to offer a final lingering thought for you to mull over. It builds on everything we've discussed today regarding the mechanisms of health. Think about the great evolutionary irony of the human organism.
The irony.
Our bodies and brains were biologically engineered over hundreds of thousands of years to absolutely thrive in states of periodic scarcity. Using fasting and fat burning to upregulate cellular cleaning, to heighten our senses, to keep our cognitive focus razor sharp. These were non-negotiable survival mechanisms. We had to be at our smartest and our fastest when we were hungry, or our ancestors would have starved.
We were literally built for the pause. We were optimized for periods of biological silence.
Exactly. Yet the modern industrialized world has trapped us in a state of constant, relentless, unprecedented abundance. We are pumped full of cheap, hyper-palatable sugars and readily available calories 24/7. And this very abundance has broken the precise, delicate hormonal mechanisms meant to keep us youthful and healthy. The abundance itself is what is killing us.
That's a powerful realization.
So it's applying intentional artificial scarcity to our physical diets through fasting and carbohydrate restriction unlocks such profound biological healing and cognitive clarity. We have to ask a much broader, more philosophical question. How else might introducing intentional scarcity or pauses into our modern, overstimulated lives trigger similar regenerative effects?
I'm taking a break from the noise.
For example, what if we applied this exact same biological framework to our mental and emotional diet? Could a digital fast intentional periods of severe information restriction, disconnecting from the endless scroll, act as a form of cognitive autophagy? Just as insulin receptors downregulate from too much sugar, our dopamine receptors are downregulating from too much digital stimulation.
That is fascinating.
Could starving our brains of constant notifications, emails, and superficial content allow our minds to clear out the mental sticky residue, recycle old thought patterns, and regenerate our attention spans in the exact same way physiological fasting heals our cells?
Oh, wow. Cognitive autophagy through digital fasting. The idea that stepping away from the endless, overwhelming buffet of modern information might be the only way to actually digest our own thoughts and heal our fractured focus, that is a brilliant connection, drawing a direct parallel between our metabolic health and our mental health, and something I'm definitely going to be exploring and thinking about all week. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you leave this conversation feeling not just informed, but empowered, equipped with the knowledge that you can absolutely take back control of your biology, turn the lights back on in your brain, and truly thrive in your golden years. Until next time, stay curious.